Should we start? Time to start?
I believe so.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Elaine Chapnick, president of the Larchmont Mamaroneck Local Summit, welcoming you to our November meeting. In spite of today's gorgeous mild weather, we know the cold days of winter will soon be here. This poses an acute crisis for those who have lost their jobs due to the pandemic and face possible eviction because they are no longer able to pay the rent. This morning, we're going to look at what that eviction crisis means in our community. But before I turn the program over to Helen, I'm going to ask you to understand that after our program, we're going to have 15 minutes of an opportunity for you to be seen with each other and talk with each other. So stick around and say hello to everybody afterwards if you have the time, because our technician is going to make that possible. So now I'm going to turn the program over to Helen Rafferty, our program chair for the day. Helen.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Elaine. As Elaine mentioned, the global pandemic we're living through has caused enormous disruption in just about everyone's lives in our community. For some of our neighbors, it could mean them losing their homes. And I'd like to introduce three panelists who are kind enough to join us this morning. They will give us their informed perspectives on the housing issues so many people in our community face, and hopefully help us think about some ways those challenges could be addressed. Our first panelist is Mr. Andrew Spatz. Andrew is both a local property owner and a practicing attorney, and very active in several community initiatives in Mamaroneck Village, such as the Mamaroneck Village Industrial Area Committee and the Mamaroneck Village Flood Mitigation Committee. Our second speaker will be Ms. Janet Rolone-Fry, who serves as the Deputy Executive Director at the Community Resource Center in Mamaroneck Village. In this role, Janet works to empower recent immigrants to become successful and active members of our Sound Shore community. Our third panelist is Ms. Blanca Lopez. Blanca works with the Office of County Executive George Latimer. She's an advisor on fair and affordable housing and on 2020 census strategies. She also liaisons with such departments as Emergency Services, Human Rights, and the Office for People with Disabilities. So we have a great panel here. So glad you guys can join us. And Andy, can I ask you to please begin the discussion?
Good morning, Elaine, Helen, and Nina. Thank you very much for having us. And Janet and Blanca, pleasure meeting you as well virtually. And I did bring my bag of cereal because it is a summit breakfast. Not the same, but as close as we can. And these are definitely some, cheers, Helen. These are definitely some challenging times. And for so many different reasons, and not just specifically with residential communities and residential homes, but also for business owners that are commercial tenants. And being a property owner, having to work through these unprecedented times and challenges, it becomes a priority for the landlord and tenants to try to work collectively. Now, if they're unable to arrive at some type of resolution, normally we would have the avenue of going to the court system for judicial intervention and assistance. But since March, it's been extraordinarily challenging and difficult to arrive at resolution because of several mandates that have been issued by the governor's office and also by the court administrator. And there's been a tremendous amount of confusion. The courts have done everything they can to try to interpret the executive orders, the court orders, and the situation remains today sort of a status quo. And to get to the specifics here, if a tenant, whether you're residential or commercial, hasn't paid their rent, again, normally what would happen is you would have a predicate demand that's served upon that individual, and then the parties would then go to court and work it out. And if they're not able to resolve it, then there would be a trial or some type of hearing to determine whether or not those individuals are evicted or not. In this situation, there was a complete hold on all actions through the summer, at which point then there was opportunity for a landlord to commence an action where if a individual, whether it was commercial or residential, could provide an affidavit saying, I've been impacted by COVID. if that were the case, then the matter is sort of set aside, and there couldn't be a warrant, there couldn't be a judgment, and the individual would be kept from being evicted. In essence, there would be a freeze on any further actions. However, if parties did have attorneys and were represented by counsel, they could settle the matter. Now, whether that means, okay, listen, pay half the rent, surrender the premises, or I'm going to defer the rent, whatever settlement that could be entered could be approved by the courts. I've participated on all components of these. It's been successful in many regards, but at the same time, it's been extraordinarily frustrating because I had a situation, and I'm sure Janet and Blanca could understand where I'm coming from. I had a situation where I was representing a property owner. It was a residential house. This wasn't a corporation. This was a family that actually inherited the house. The children were trying to administer the house. They have to pay taxes. They had a tenant who hadn't paid rent since February. They went to court. And the tenants were saying, yes, judge, please give us a judgment, give us a warrant so we can take it to the various social services so they can assist us to find alternative housing. So it was actually a rare situation where the landlord and the tenants were both agreeing, saying, yeah, give me the judgment. We will go get assistance from the county or the state to get new housing or financial relief. And my client, being the landlord, was willing to say, yeah, however long it takes, we'll give you time. But we know you need a piece of paper to take to the administrator to get those funds. The judge, who in his great discretion, and we have a lot of wonderful judges in this county and locally, actually sent a memo to one of the administrative judges saying, hey, we have a unique extreme circumstance, a unique circumstance here, and we're looking to be able to issue a judgment so they can get housing. Unfortunately, because of the interpretation of the orders, the judge wasn't able to do so. So here we have a situation where we have a tenant who's looking to get alternative housing and needs a judgment warrant because that's just the mechanism in place, but wasn't able to do so. So, we have a very unique situation where you have parties that are trying to work with each other that, unfortunately, because of the interpretations of the executive orders and the administrative court orders, are sort of have one hand tied behind the back. You have some landlords who don't want to deal at all with their tenants and saying, get out, and are frustrated and saying, as a lawyer, you don't understand what it's like to be a landlord. I'm like, but wait a second, I can, because I am a landlord, and I've had to take financial hits in order for a collective global resolution so that we arrive at the same goal line. We don't want to hurt the tenants, but at the same time, we also have expenses. How do you offset? We have to be creative to try to arrive at a common goal. How do you get creative? Whether that means, again, letting somebody out of their lease. And the demand for residential in Westchester County right now is through the roof. I was sharing with Elaine earlier, Mamaroneck is in a very unique situation commercially, where distribution and warehousing is at an all-peak demand, whereas retail and restaurants are getting absolutely beaten down, especially sports gyms. I have a very dear friend who owns a hot yoga studio. They weren't able to operate at all until most recently. So there's so many unique circumstances. And this is when individuals like Blanca and Janet and myself and the courts really have to try to work hard so that the interests and the vitality of the businesses and property owners are protected, but same thing with the tenants. And these are, again, unprecedented, extraordinary times. And I'm kind of giving you an 8-month layover in about 4 minutes here, but so as an attorney and as a property owner, there are all types of challenges, but there are answers. And actually, most recently on Friday, there was a new executive order that was issued that reflected the fact that as of this week, if we went to court, if a property owner went to court, and if the tenants didn't show up to court, the courts can now issue a default judgment, but they're stayed, meaning they will not be enforced for a minimum of 60 days. Whereas once upon a time, if you went to court pre-COVID and a party didn't show up in court, I, as a lawyer, could say, Judge, I'm asking for a default judgment, and you're entitled to that. And usually a judge will give a 5-day to a 20-day stay to allow, listen, maybe that person, God forbid, was in the hospital, or maybe they were out of town, or something, some urgent situation arrived where they couldn't come to court. But now the governor is saying, listen, if a party does not show up, then you can still get a judgment warrant, but you cannot do anything with it until 2021. And I'll leave with this note: the problem that we're having, both tenants and the landlords alike, unfortunately, like any situation, people are taking advantage of these situations where they use the very good executive orders and court mandates as a shield and a sword. Individuals that can certainly pay their rent are saying, you know what, I don't have to. Governor says I don't have to. I'll see you in 2021. Whereas you have individuals like these people that I was in court with 2 weeks ago who are begging and saying, we need help. We're willing to work, do whatever we need to work with the landlord to arrive at a common goal, but we can't get the help and assistance that they need. So there is a problem here that I'm hoping that perhaps with Blanca's and Janet's input, and especially with the courts, we can arrive at a common goal so that individuals can't abuse and hide behind the mandates and orders. So, I mean, that's my take so far on the state of landlord tenant. And I'll leave it with this. I have re-emphasized to my clients that we are in challenging times, unprecedented challenges that we've never faced before. And there is not one answer. There's not one solution. It's going to take a collective effort of cooperation, patience, and understanding.
Yes, Andy, thank you so much. That's a huge amount of information presented in amazingly.
I know, it's like 8 months we're coming
Congrats.
out at the same time.
I'd like to now move on and ask Janet to please give us her perspectives as she's working, I would say, very much on the front lines of helping to keep some stability and home security in the lives of people who really are facing challenges. Janet, up to you.
Good morning, everyone. I think this conversation, it's important to happen. So I am glad to be part of this panel. And so my name is Janet Verlon-Fry, and I am the Deputy Director of the Community Resource Center. So the CRC was founded in 1998, the Hispanic Resource Center, to reflect our inclusiveness in serving the community. So I'm here today to talk about the looming eviction crisis. So since the pandemic started, many members of the community have lost their jobs and have fallen behind on rent. So New York implemented a moratorium on evictions. I guess, we all know that. However, the moratorium is scheduled to expire at the end of this year. Based on CRC's work with the community members, I can tell you that hundreds of families are severely behind on their rent and unlikely to face evictions if this issue is not addressed. So with the work with other nonprofits and community organizers, we have identified that that there is a way to address this issue and maybe mitigate this impending crisis. So one of the things that we can do right now is, for example, fundraising to provide rental assistance to community members who are severely behind in rent. And secondly is to support the Right to Counsel initiative that provides legal assistance to low-income families in Westchester County. So the community members we serve are low-income families, most of them undocumented. Most of them work in the area of domestic work, landscaping, construction, childcare, and other low-income jobs. So these jobs were among the first one to be eliminated due to the pandemic, and most of them has not returned to work yet. So since the pandemic started in April, more than 500 families contacted us seeking financial assistance for food, rent, medication, and other essential needs. And in the following months, we kept track of families who were falling behind on their rent to assist with rental assistance, landlord-tenant mediation, tenants' rights, and other housing resources. So by August of this year, we had about 175 families severely behind in rent. And this is sort of like an average of 5 months in arrears, an estimated total of $125,000. So we assembled a team to work directly with those families and help them access rental assistance provided by the government and other nonprofit organizations. So there were challenges to help those families. For example, out of those 175 families, only 55 families were willing to move forward on submitting their application for rental assistance with the government. 120 families who decided not to move forward were afraid of potential repercussions and had identified temporary solutions. For example, borrowing money from family members or friends to pay partial payments towards their rent. In a few instances, working out a payment plan with their landlords if landlords were willing to do that. And in some cases, just simply waiting until the moratorium expires and hoping that it would get extended again, or maybe some other governmental program would be implemented to address the rent arrears. So based on the number of families on our list and the continuous calls from community members requesting rental assistance, we are foreseeing a tsunami of evictions being filed in court after January 1st, when the moratorium is set to expire. Although landlords have been, and these are the landlords of the families that we have been interacting with. So those landlords have been, although those landlords have been prevented from evicting families who owe rent, while the moratorium is still in effect, we have heard from some families that their landlords are demanding rent payments or demanding them to vacate the apartment using harassment or threats to force those tenants out. So we have no doubt that after the moratorium is lifted, landlords will use the court system to force those families out of their homes. So there is a tremendous need for rental assistance among community members, driven in part by their undocumented status. Undocumented families simply do not qualify for many governmental assistance programs. And what we call mixed status families, and for example, undocumented parents, but US citizen children, face unique challenges meeting eligibility criteria for governmental programs offering rental assistance. So many governmental assistance programs are income tested too, which is to say that a family below a certain income threshold are eligible. So many of those community members we serve are low income and fall below the threshold, the income threshold. However, the thresholds are prorated based on the number of eligible household members. So for example, a family of 4 with an income of $2,000 per month would normally qualify. However, if the 2 parents are undocumented and only 2 children are eligible because they have documentation or immigration status, the government will base their eligibility on the income threshold for a household with only 2 family members, in which case the $2,000 per month income may exceed that threshold and render them ineligible. So this underscores the need for nonprofits like the CRC to fundraise and provide rental assistance to families who fall between the cracks of existing support systems. And in addition to providing funding, we need to advocate for the right to counsel for low-income tenants in Westchester. As I mentioned, despite of the moratorium, some landlords are already demanding that tenants vacate their housing using harassment and threats. And undocumented community members are particularly vulnerable to these illegal tactics due to their fear of deportation. So just to end with a story here, which kind of like backs up the advocacy around the right to counsel, is that a month and a half ago, a family in Mamaroneck contacted us because they needed help with their landlord, mediating with their landlord, because they didn't know why their landlord wanted them to vacate the apartment. They didn't owe rent. And I mean, miraculously, they didn't fall behind during the pandemic. So they didn't understand why the landlord just wanted them out. So when we approached the landlord, we try to find out the reasons why he wanted his family out. And he said that they had to be, there were some repairs to be done inside the apartment. So the family had to leave the apartment so that his contractor can go in and do those repairs. When we asked the tenant said that, I mean, there's maybe a crack on the ceiling, but it doesn't require, for the family to vacate the apartment. So we went back and forth with the landlord, and the landlord just didn't want to listen, either the tenant or CRC. So what happened at the end was the landlord was using threats, even calling the police on the tenants if they didn't vacate. So we knew that those tactics work sometimes with families that are undocumented. So we started informing the family about their rights. We offer also to consult their case with a housing attorney to see, in what ways they can advocate for the client. So finally, at the end, the landlord, stopped, sort of like understood that he couldn't get the family out, that the family had an organization and also other resources to stay in their apartment. So that sort of like ended as a happy, ending, in the sense of the family got to stay home. But still, there are many families, and this is what we heard of during the pandemic, that they had to leave because their landlords were threatening them, and unfortunately, they just were too afraid to fight that back, or to assert their rights, as tenants, to continue staying in their homes.
Thank you, Janet. We're hearing so many numbers and so many facts and figures and reading so much in the media, but when you break it down to stories about families and families that actually live in our community, that are our neighbors, it makes the crisis real on a whole other level. So thank you, for bringing that very personal and real perspective. I'd like to kind of maybe bring us outward a little bit and ask Blanca if she could tell us what the county is doing to address these issues, and what if any, strategies we might learn about that could hopefully improve the situation for tenants and for landlords as well.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me and for allowing us to provide information with respect to how the county is responding to this issue. I want to thank the organizers of the summit. And I also want to, in addition to describing the different programs that we have, I do want to thank all of you for this conversation you're having, because this is also part of the housing needs assessment that the county, it's a study that the county released close to a year ago, which provides a lot of data with respect to the housing needs, not just in the county overall, but in each municipality. We released it about a year ago. and the county executive had been meeting regionally with different municipalities in early this year. Unfortunately, once COVID hit, we had to pause our outreach with respect to the housing needs assessment, but our Commissioner of Planning, Norma Drummond, has been presenting to different municipalities. As a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, she did present this report to the town of Mamaroneck board meeting, which you could find in their website. And she is going around talking to different municipalities, specifically to the data as it relates to each community. So I figured the best way for me to be able to address the different programs that the county has designed in these last couple of months would be through a PowerPoint presentation. Once I'm done with my presentation, I will also include the link to the housing needs in the chat in case any of you would like to review it. And that is also online in the county's website. As my colleagues had mentioned with respect to the moratorium, as all of you know, the governor signed various executive orders throughout 2020. And most recently, all evictions are extended until January 1st of 2021. The moratorium protects residential and commercial tenants as well as homeowners. It prohibits charges or fees for late rent payments. And tenants may also use their security deposit as payment for at least 1 month's rent payment and then repay their security deposit over time. As Andrew mentioned, eviction proceedings in housing court involving case arrears for COVID-related cases are on hold. However, any pre-COVID cases are being reviewed and handled by the courts. So the county, through the CARES Act, received funding to be able to design various programs to address evictions. Which I will go into in my next couple of slides. But I do want to let you know that even if we didn't have these funds through the CARES Act, on a yearly basis, the county provides millions of dollars to various nonprofit organizations to address rental arrears. So this year alone, the county funded over $5 million to approximately 13 nonprofit organizations to be able to assist their constituents with any rental or foreclosure issues that our county residents may be experiencing. The funds are usually allocated to various different county departments, such as Planning, Office for Women, Department of Social Services, and our Senior Programs and Services Department. So with respect to COVID-related evictions, the county designed 4 different programs to address residential eviction prevention. Later on in my presentation, I'll talk about commercial tenants. But for purposes of where we are right now, I wanted to go a little bit more into each specific program. You can also find more information in the county's Department of Planning website, which I will list in the following slides. The 4 programs that I'm going to mention are administered by our planning department, and the funding for these programs come from the CARES Act, which allows us to provide eviction prevention programs countywide. And then we also have an additional set of funding from the federal government for our consortium communities, which are part of the Urban County Consortium, which receive community development block grants, as well as emergency solutions grants, all that aim to prevent homelessness and to stabilize communities. The programs that we designed were based on the following considerations. We listened closely and we talked to various community organizations such as the CRC to find out what is going on and how we can best assist. We also spoke to the president of the Building Realty Institute, which is an organization, a member organization of landlords and management companies throughout the county. And we also looked at the programs that were designed by the state. Janet had mentioned the program that the Homes and Community Renewal had put together over the summer to address evictions. And we also looked at other programs that were designed in other cities and states. So the eviction prevention programs that are available for residents countywide, you can find all of this information in the website, westchestergov.com/housing help. The funding, because these programs were designed using CARES Act money, they end in December of 2020. This is not to say that this funding may not be expanded till next year, but for right now, this is what we know. The first program that we have is the Housing Stabilization Program for landlords impacted by COVID. Landlords with properties between 3 to 50 units are eligible. Initially, our eligibility was only between 4 and 20, but we've expanded that. The county will cover up to 75% of arrears and late charges to be paid to landlords or management companies, and tenants must agree to a rental payment plan for the remaining 25%. So that is something that they would have to agree with their landlord or management company. Tenants that were current before March 1st, or if there were any arrears occurred before COVID, unfortunately would not be covered in this program. Landlords could only address any arrears happening after April 1st. But I do want to say that this doesn't mean that we don't have other programs that are available for pre-COVID rental arrears. That is primarily through our DSS and Office for Women and our consortium communities funding. In this program, landlords apply, not tenants. So landlords will submit an application directly to the Department of Planning. This program is being managed in-house, and we have about $7.5 million allocated to this program. Our fact sheets on the website are being updated. We did have a lottery not too long ago for this particular program. It's lottery based because we want to make sure that if there are landlords that have various buildings throughout the county, that they don't all get the funding. We want to make sure that every landlord and every management company has an opportunity to apply and to be selected for this program. Our other program that is offered countywide is our foreclosure prevention assistance. This is for owner-occupied single and multifamily homes. 1 to 3 family homes are eligible. We will assist with up to 4 months of mortgage arrears. And again, the arrears have to be tied directly to COVID. The arrears must have occurred after April 1st. Payments will be made directly to the bank or the mortgage company, and we have acquired the assistance of 4 housing nonprofit organizations who are helping county residents, county homeowners, to be able to address their mortgage arrears. And these are the Community Housing Innovations, the Bridge Fund, Human Development Services of Westchester, and Westchester Residential Opportunities. And we have allocated $2 million to this program. The following programs that I'm going to talk about are for residents in our Urban County Consortium. The Urban County Consortium allows for, in our case right now, up to 27 municipalities, which includes the Village of Mamaroneck and the town of Mamaroneck, the portion outside of the Village of Larchmont, to be able to receive federal funding since they cannot directly apply for funding from HUD. The Department of Planning then acts as the administrator to these funds, and they allocate funding based on the applications that all these member municipalities submit. HUD awards funding yearly to consortium communities for 3 programs. The CDBG, which is the Community Development Block Grant, ESG, which is the Emergency Solutions Grant, and the home programs. CDBG, as I mentioned before, could be for nonprofits operating in the municipality, serving a low to moderate income residents, or for municipality related projects, whether it's playgrounds, senior centers, sidewalks, anything related to any programs that will benefit a majority of their residents. And the home program is for affordable housing. We are able to fund development to nonprofit or private developers who would like to build new affordable housing opportunities or repair or renovate or restore current affordable housing in stock. The funding that we are using for this particular programs come from the ESG, which is the Emergency Solutions Grant. The two programs that I will talk about are designed to assist low-income households residing in these municipalities. Again, as I had mentioned, up to this year, we have 27 municipalities who will be able to take advantage of this program. Starting next year, we have additional municipalities joining the consortium, but if there's additional funding for next year's through HUD, we will be able to expand these programs to the other 3 municipalities. Just to give you an idea of what the income threshold is for a family of 4, the area median income at 50% is $62,900. So the eviction prevention program that we have for residents in the consortium communities will allow them to cover rent or cooperative common charges. It will also cover utility arrears, whether it's Con Ed, NYSEG, or water bills. Again, their rent must have occurred after April 1st. The payment will go directly to the landlord or management company, and funds were awarded to 4 nonprofit organizations: Washingtonville Housing Alliance, which is right in downtown Mamaroneck. We also have Choice of New Rochelle, Westchester Residential Opportunities, and the Community Housing Innovation. We allocated $350,000 to this program. And the other program that we have for residents living in consortium communities is what I call the Moving Forward program. This will allow eligible households for the county to pay their rent for up to 12 months moving forward. And we realized that there were many households whose employment or hours of employment were either frozen or had decreased, primarily those households where they could not begin working since they may have been in phase 4 of the reopening plan. So we wanted to make sure that people who had to wait until July, August, or even September, as Andrew had mentioned, to be able to go back to work would have a program or a plan in place that will help them stabilize their housing situation moving forward. For this particular program, we are handling it in-house, which means that our Department of Planning will be addressing all of the applications and reviewing the paperwork and selecting candidates based on a lottery. Households with Section 8 or living in public housing, unfortunately, are not eligible. However, we want to make sure that households that are moving forward are living in units that are safe and that meet the housing quality standards. So we will be checking to make sure that the apartments are safe and are indicative of people who are able to live in those particular apartments. The applications are available through the Department of Planning website. And as I had mentioned before, there will be a lottery to address the candidates who will be selected. $1.9 million are available for this program as well. And what assistance do we have for commercial tenants? Just yesterday, our Office of Economic Development announced the funding recipients of the county's Business First grant program. This was a program where applicants, whether they were nonprofits or small businesses operating in the county, could apply for the following funding uses, whether it was to retain or support employees or for employee benefits, for rent or mortgage payments, to address any temporary COVID-19 related restrictions on business activities, for marketing, for buying safety equipment or other related expenses directly related to impacts of the pandemic. For this particular program, which was launched in September, funds were available were up to $49,000. And in all, there were 262 awards, which was a total of $10 million from the CARES Fund. Of the 262 awardees, 220 said that they would be using all or part of their funds towards rent or mortgage payments. While this program closed recently, we do plan on providing more additional grants to local businesses in the near future. And for more information, you can check out the WestChesterCatalyst.com, which is the website for our Office of Economic Development. The other programs that we do have, however, and this one in particular is for the nonprofit assistance grants. And these grants are available for nonprofits that operate within our 27 consortium communities, serving low to moderate income households. We give priority consideration to agencies that provide housing services, daycare, or mental health services. The funding request is up to $50,000, and we have allocated $380,000 for this program. Funding for this program is actually available until April 31st, 2022. So we want to make sure that people who may not be or business owners who may not be experiencing any hardship know that if they do experience this later on next year or the following year, that there are places to go for assistance. This program, just like the other ones I had mentioned, is being run through the Department of Planning. And for more information, you can visit westchestercounty.gov/CDBG. Again, this program can be used for a program costs, rent of space for program operations, renovation of space related to, in order to protect employees or clients from COVID-19, and purchase for personal protection equipment. With respect to micro enterprises, we also have another program that is for small businesses with 5 or fewer employees that are operating in the consortium communities and that have been negatively impacted by COVID-19. There are a set of criteria that these micro enterprises must meet, and these are listed in the program fact sheet. We have allocated $1.2 million for this program, and we're actually working with Community Capital New York, which is a nonprofit organization who's helping us to receive and review the applications submitted. The funding available to apply for grants is up to $10,000. And again, money can be used for rent, for working capital, for marketing, for technical training, machinery, and equipment. And for more information, you can check out again westchestercounty.gov/CDBG. And that's what I have for my program for now.
Blanca, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Would now like to give people an opportunity to ask questions. I would also like to point out that the reason that's not going to get totally screwed up is because I'm not actually doing that. Sean is with us from LMC Media. LMC has been instrumental in allowing the summit to continue its vital mission and to keep reaching people even while we can't all get together in person. So my personal shout out to LMC as well as to our wonderful panelists. So I will ask Sean to please kind of get us going in letting people raise their hands. And for all of you that have questions, there should be an icon at the bottom of your screen that's a little hand icon. You can click on that and you can join the queue to ask questions. So please feel free to do so, and let's get some questions, please, for our panelists.
Helen, before we get to the panel, can I just jump in just for 2 things?
Sure.
With regards to what Janet was explaining before, and I'm really pleased that she raised these concerns about the efforts by some landlords of pursuing illegal evictions. When a petition is filed, I wish I had this on Blanca's making me look like an amateur here, because I wish I had the attachments to show you, but a landlord must put 2 notices on a petition, one in English, one in Spanish, conveying the fact that during the coronavirus emergency, you may be entitled to, by law, for additional days, weeks to answer the petition. Please contact an attorney. And if you don't have one, it actually provides NewYorkCourts.gov evictions. So there's actually, if it's not done, a court won't even entertain an action. So that's really, really, really good. And also you've got Hudson Valley Justice Center and legal services of Hudson Valley that do a tremendous job advocating on behalf of residential tenants that are really struggling. And I've worked with many of the attorneys. They're incredibly seasoned, they're professional, and they really do balance the scales here. And Judy Studebaker, who was a pioneer and a legend among legends with the legal services of Hudson Valley, really did a tremendous job in incorporating that and making sure that people who otherwise would not have a voice do have a voice. And with regards to Blanca, I look forward to engaging in dialogue with you and Executive Latimer and your staff, because one of the issues that we find, again, as a property owner and also as an attorney representing both commercial and residential tenants and landlords, single family homes, if you have a single family, if you're an owner of a single family home and you don't even buy the property for investment purposes, if it was given to you, or if you did buy a single family home for a profit, and what happens is, unfortunately, is you kind of fall between the 3 to 50 units in terms of being and having availability to resources. And what happens is you get a single family homeowner who has September to pay taxes and obviously utilities and water, etc. That really becomes problematic. And we've been really working hard, again, with the tenants and the landlords to try to find that balance. And we would definitely welcome continued dialogue to make sure that single family homeowners and also the landlords who own commercial properties that aren't for aren't housing or occupied by non-profit entities. So there's so much dialogue that can be had. I know that there's many landlords out there that are eager to work and to assist tenants that are in distress during these challenging times, as there are landlords who can be very vicious. As I said, I represent just as many tenants, commercial, residential, as I do landlords. And these are challenging times. And like I prefaced before, the communication between the county and the bar and the various wonderful organizations that assist people, it's paramount. So I think that's so important. I'm sorry, Helen, thank you for letting me sort of jump in there.
Oh, thank you, Andy. Very, very relevant remarks. I'll now ask Sean at LMC to get us started with our Q&A and allow some of our questions, if we have some, to come to the front.
Sure. First up is Kate Bialo. So Kate, if you can unmute yourself, you should be able to talk.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yep.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for this extremely timely presentation. I have been thinking about this whole eviction tsunami that everyone is concerned about. And of course, from the standpoint of Furniture Share House, we are the place that people come to get replacement furniture. And often we will find that our clients are there because they were evicted and lost all of their possessions. So it's an area that I would like to explore would be how to provide some kind of emergency moving and storage services for people who ultimately are evicted, for them to be able to hold on to their possessions until they are able to find permanent housing, rather than having to put all their possessions to the curb and then replace them all at a later time. So there are a couple of things that I need to understand more about. And the first one would be, first of all, how to find people who are on the verge of eviction. And I suppose I need to ascertain which agencies would be the best ones or would be likely to be representing clients who need this service. Secondly, I'm really curious about the timing of it and how much notice will a family have from the moment that they are told, yes, you have to vacate the premises, and the time that they actually have to get out, because that would be the window, obviously, that would be available. Then the other thing that's interesting to me about your presentation, Blanca, are the different sources of funding. Furniture Share House actually applied for one of the Catalyst grants, and we just found out yesterday we did not get it, and we're in the second wave. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. But it seems to me that perhaps some of those programs we might be able to shape an application for funds to help pay for storage, trucking, rental, and packing materials, which seems to me those are the main expenses that we would have. Obviously, you could try to get storage companies to donate X number of months for a family. You could try to get a trucking company to donate truck rentals. I feel like you could organize some volunteer SWAT teams who would kind of be able to come and help make it all happen. But if you're not able to get all of that donated, then funding to be able to pay for those services would be sort of a step that would need to be focused on. So, Andrew, maybe you can talk about the timing issue.
Hey, those are some really good questions. First and foremost, with regards to property, if a landlord goes in back pre-COVID, even if a judgment warrant was granted, if a landlord went in there without a marshal and threw, it's not like the days many, many years ago where you can literally go on Christmas Eve and throw all of the furniture out on a street and wait for pickup. That is illegal. A landlord is obligated to go through a authorized, deputized, marshal, sheriff, someone who's authorized and recognized by the state or county or locally to enforce a judgment warrant, at which point each municipality has different provisions, but the landlord at their expense must store safely the belongings. Now, on occasions, a landlord will go in and there'll just be a mattress and garbage stuff behind, but there are other occasions when there are belongings, and I will reiterate, and the court will often reiterate that you can go through with a judgment, but the furnishings and belongings must be placed in a separate storage facility at the expense of the landlord. Now, sometimes it may be 30 days. Some municipalities are different. It's up to each municipality. With respect to notice, pre-COVID, if you did not pay rent, if someone allegedly didn't pay rent for whatever reason, once upon a time, depending on the lease, it could be as few as 3 days. Some had 10 days. Now, due to a 2019 law, every landlord must provide to their tenants 14 days written notice that gets served on them or sent to them, advising them that you have not paid XYZ, which must be paid by this certain date. If that date surpasses, if you go beyond that date, then a landlord has the right to commence an action, a summary proceeding, which can't be any fewer than 10 days, no more than 17. So there's a window. So already you have 24 days that you would have to wait to get to court, at which point then once you're in court, if indeed a judge, after hearing the facts and circumstances, he or she may grant a judgment and warrant, which is still eligible for additional time, meaning it could be a stay of 5 days, 10 days, even 21 days, depending on the circumstances. Even in a default, if nobody shows up pre-COVID, it was not an automatic judgment warrant. Usually a judge, he and she in her good discretion, would provide a 5 to 10 day window with which, if they were out of town, there was an emergency, they could come back in and file an emergency order to be heard on that issue. So there are layers of protection to the benefit of the tenants, to the chagrin of some of my landlord clients who literally want to come, shut the power down, change the locks. That is no longer, that is an unlawful eviction. Not only could they be prosecuted, but they would also face severe civil penalties and civil suit if they were to embark upon that.
Interesting. So the landlord is required to pay the storage. I suspect that
In some municipalities, yes. And I
Yeah.
believe here in the village and Harrison and the Sound Shore, we're pretty tough on that. You can't just go in there and throw stuff out on the curb. Absolutely not.
Well, first of all, probably tenants don't necessarily know that and the landlords are probably not going to offer that information. And secondly, my guess is that the stuff that's put to the curb is put there probably by the clients, as opposed to the landlords going in and throwing everything onto the curb, because number one, they don't know that they have this option, and number two, they just have no other way to deal with it. So, the idea would be to try to get to these folks ahead of time and let them know, number one, that they have the option of forcing the landlord to pay for the storage. But if for whatever reason they don't feel like they can pursue that option, to see whether there might be some other way to create a model that would allow them to put their stuff in storage, hopefully locally, not have to go far afield. Because I'm sure that most clients probably don't have the resources to go out, rent a truck, go to a storage company, rent a unit. We all think, oh, that's easy. We've done it for our adult kids and so on and so forth. But, particularly a family that's in the throes of being evicted, they're not going to have those kinds of resources. So, and storage units, as we all know, are very expensive. So anyway, it's just an idea that occurred to me because, we do see families that come to us frequently who lost everything to eviction. And, I just hate to think of furniture that we've already given families being put out to the curb, and then they're going to come back and get more furniture from us. That's sort of not the way it's supposed to work. So I'm just putting it out there. I'm going to continue to try to ask around about it. But if people think that this is something that's a service that would be useful to have, I'd love to talk a little bit more about it.
Kate, I think Legal Services of Hudson Valley and Hudson Valley Justice Center would be a great place to start on grassroots efforts in that regards. They make appearances regularly in the Sound Shore, and I think that, and obviously, listen, you hope that the attorneys that are representing the landlords are also reminding them of the obligations, responsibilities, and the marshals and the deputies that are authorized to do so. They also, have to be aware of these circumstances, and most are. My experience with the ones that are in the Sound Shore are very, very knowledgeable of the obligations. And I've even had a situation where a landlord didn't want to do it, and the marshal said, "Fine, then guess what? To effectuate an eviction, you actually have to have it done by a deputized individual." And I've had the marshal call me and say, "I'm not doing this because the landlord's not willing to cooperate." And hey, that's on, I respect that. If they're not going to adhere to it, then, you got to play by the rules, and no one's above the law, especially in these days, these challenging and unprecedented days. No one is above the law, and, we have to have respect for one another.
Can I add
Thank
something?
you, Andy. Thank you, Kate. Go on, Janet, please.
Yes, thank you, Andrea, for mentioning the Hudson Valley Justice Center and the Legal Service of the Hudson Valley. We actually have been working with them since the summer, and we understand that the Legal Service of the Hudson Valley doesn't provide legal representation to families who are undocumented. So that's where Hudson Valley Justice Center comes in and provide legal representation to those families. However, there is a limited resource when it comes to legal representation. Hudson Valley Justice Center is a small group, and they can deal with a number of evictions that are happening right now. And I mean, let alone the number of evictions that are going to be happening in January. So they are actually leading this campaign of the right to counsel because they know that they won't be able to meet the demand, after January 1st. So we're trying to see in what ways we can provide legal representation, either pro bono or maybe with legislative action, so then tenants have access to defend their homes in a way. So, and yes, illegal evictions are happening. We actually do know your rights in a very grassroots way when it comes to immigration officials, ICE officers. So in this time, we have sort of like resorted to those know your rights methods because landlords were aggressive. Some landlords, I'm not going to say all of them, but were aggressive in terms of telling their tenants to vacate the apartment. Some of them were like, "No, I'm not having the moratorium. I don't care about, this moratorium. So you don't pay rent, you just have to go." So usually when tenants are faced with this type of confrontation, so instead of calling the police or reaching out to a community organization, they prefer to leave their apartments, move in with relative, family members, and just to have a safe space. But that leads to overcrowding situations that are happening right now and are putting tenants in really hazardous, dangerous conditions. So although, and we have distributed informational materials, infographic about how families can seek legal representation or at least counseling. But families, this plays out in different ways. Some families really know how to enforce it. Some others just prefer not to get into trouble and leave. So it's very hard for nonprofits to navigate that now. And we are used to the number of family members coming to us, seeking for this assistance. But now that number has multiplied by hundreds. So it's gonna be, tough to continue assisting, each family going forward.
Janet, this is where I think, Blanca, I think that the key to this is the communication and cooperation between the county, landlords, and obviously the grassroots operations and organizations that are assisting the tenants, because we don't want to hit a situation where people are doing self-help. If you have a landlord who is owed rent from back in February of last year of 2020, and they understand that, okay, I'm not going to go to jail over this, but okay, so I get sued for an unlawful eviction. Fine, I'm going to go change the lock. I'm going to go do self-help. Let them sue me in court, but at least I can re-rent. That is now the dialogue I'm having with clients, that literally saying, listen, here are the options. Yes, you technically could go out there and do this, and yes, you could get sued and it's illegal, but let's take a deep breath. Let's bring it back a little bit. And that is the push and pull that we as attorneys now are having with our landlords, and at the same time with tenants alike who are saying, well, I could kind of pay, but you know what, I don't have to because I have until 2021. I've spoken to many tenants. I'm saying, listen, you have a lease, you have obligations. Let's try to find ways to offset your rent. If it's a commercial property, let's try to sublease it, share the space. If you're doing business A and there's a business B that can complement your use and at the same time offset your overhead, let's approach that with the landlord rather than saying, I'm just not paying. So really, it's such an important dialogue in a sense of saying everyone needs to take a deep breath. What can we do to get through this together with the county? Blanca, and I applaud the efforts that are being made to date. And I think there's, like anything else, we can improve upon what we have, and we do so by dialogue and communicating, and everybody sort of taking a deep breath and saying, what can we do to get through this together? But Janet, that's a great, that's a problem. And you have people that are desperate, tenants and landlords alike, that are absolutely desperate, looking to the court for answers. And unfortunately, the court system saying, hey, we can't do anything because of the executive orders and the administrative court orders. So really, you're sort of like as if you're on an airplane waiting to land, circling over LaGuardia or Kennedy, waiting to land, waiting to do something.
Okay, let's try to get a couple of more questions in, folks, if we don't mind. All these comments are so good and so relevant, but I do think we have a couple of people that are there hoping to get a question in, and we're a little pressed for time. Sean, do we have anyone up next that's been waiting for their chance?
Up next is Anne McAndrews.
Anne, please.
Good morning. A bit of an administrative question. I realize that the Village of Larchmont is not a member of the Westchester County Urban Consortium. There has been, I asked about this last year, and I think the timing was outside of an application cycle. This is because so many of the programs from the county level are attached to membership in the CDBG. And I think it's time to bring this to the attention of the Village of Larchmont again. And I was wondering, Blanca, maybe I could get in touch with you separately, and we can investigate the application cycle and present the village with a proposal of being affirmative, rather than saying, oh, here's another thing that you should be doing. So I'm a former mayor of the village, and I'll get in touch with you privately and see if we can get the Village of Larchmont involved in these programs. Thanks.
Absolutely. We would love to have the Village of Larchmont as part of our consortium municipalities. Please do get in touch with me, and I'll be more than happy to arrange for a meeting also with Commissioner Drummond so we can discuss the paperwork that's required. But we would love to increase our consortium communities. Thanks.
Right. Larchmont has been in and out of CDBG on several occasions, so this is nothing new. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Anne. Do we have any more questions, Sean?
Yes, we have Carl Finger is up next.
Unmute. Okay. Hi, how are you? Good morning, everybody. Am I
Carl.
audible? Thanks for letting me chat. Couple of quick points, more than questions. First of all, great presentation. Thank you for inviting me. I'm an attorney in White Plains. I am chair of the Westchester County Bar Association COVID Landlord Tenant Task Force. And I wanted to just make a couple of comments. First of all, the programs that the county has run, I wanted to mention that I didn't hear if it was, but they did a program where the landlords could apply for assistance directly. And I thought that was really great because it opened up a whole other avenue for helping people who, especially it was geared towards smaller landlords where you may have 8 units. And if 2 people aren't paying, you're not paying your mortgage, you're not paying your taxes. So I thought that was a good opportunity. I hope they'll look into doing that again.
We're still doing it, just so you know.
We are, yeah. I know it had to close, and then they had to redetermine if they had enough money. They've run some programs to explain it to landlords, which through the Builders Institute and other organizations. So I think that's been really helpful. I hope they'll keep doing that. Second observation, just a clarification really on a legal process. The governor has a habit of making press releases and saying one thing, but when you look at the orders that he signs, they actually tend to say something slightly or substantially different. And I just think it's important to be aware that at the moment, it's not really accurate to say that there won't be any evictions until January. I know that's what the public relations faces that he put on it. And I think that likely there won't be a lot of evictions until January, but the legal process is not entirely stalled out. It depends on the type of case. It depends on when it was started now. Cases that are started today actually may get resolved faster than cases that were started 2 weeks ago because of the way the order was written. So I think, everybody should just be aware that things are changing somewhat rapidly. And the last comment I wanted to make is there's a big concern about sort of this overwhelming number of evictions come January or when the courts start really processing the cases. I'm not sure that's really going to be the case for the following reason. We have the Tenant Safe Harbor Act that was passed in July, and that law says that if a tenant faced a hardship during the period of COVID, they can't be evicted for the arrears that accrued as a result of that financial hardship. So one of the things that I've been discussing with the judges and court system is the idea that delaying those cases where the tenant won't get evicted anyway isn't really helping anybody, because if they're not going to get evicted, we should just clear the case out of the system and not have a big backlog later, which is a potential issue. And by the same token, those cases where the tenants are in danger of possibly being evicted because they've fallen into arrears, not necessarily because of COVID, those cases we want to move forward because, and Blanca can correct me, but I believe there are restrictions on, the number of months that DSS will supplement. And the problem is if you have a tenant that owes 4 months and you get into court and they get told you better get to DSS because, you're facing eviction, they'll go to DSS and they might get financial aid. If another 4 months go by because it's being adjourned and suddenly the tenant owes 8 months, then DSS won't supply that assistance anymore. So, we're encouraging tenants to get to DSS when we're in court, and we hope they're doing that. And I want to compliment DSS on one other part of that, which is they've been working with the county to set up terminals, computer terminals at churches in the cities in New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, which, New Rochelle, the terminal is probably pretty close to Mamaroneck and Larchmont. So there's opportunities for tenants who don't have computer access to get to a local terminal and make an application for financial aid a little easier than going to White Plains. And we're trying to make people aware of that because that benefits everybody. Even those landlord attorneys that are doing evictions, the best scenario really isn't to go through the whole eviction. The landlord just wants their money. So sorry for taking time to make a bunch of comments and not really ask a question, but I think Blanca and Andy may have some feedback on those comments, and it's a great program. Thank you very much.
And Carl, you only have 4 courts to hit this morning. I know that, but
Yeah, I'm running. I pulled my car over. I'm on my way to New Rochelle.
don't get Carl.
So just to comment on what Mr. Finger had mentioned, yes, DSS, you can apply for assistance online through their particular websites, and there are different stations that we have worked throughout the county for people who don't have internet access to go and apply online. Obviously, because of COVID, we have to kind of limit how many people can come into our DSS district offices. With respect to the programs that I described, you don't need to go to DSS to be reviewed for eligibility. You just go straight to the nonprofit. I think the understanding was, and it's not a law or any type of specific procedure, but usually in order to apply for eviction arrears funding from the county would first have to go to DSS. That is not the case with the 4 programs I mentioned for rental eviction. We want residents to go directly to either the nonprofits, depending on what the programs are, or to the Department of Planning for assistance. As soon as that particular household knows that they're falling behind, we want to see them right away instead of waiting for 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, when it will get harder to pay for the arrear. So I just want to make sure I'm clarifying that you do not need to go to DSS first to apply for the funding that I just discussed with respect to any COVID-related rental arrears. Thanks.
Thank you, Blanca. Elaine, how are we doing for time?
Well, we're over our limit. We usually end at 9. So I think we should really wrap up. Are there any other really urgent questions? Because I think this is our time limit, really. A lot of people, I think, have already chosen to leave our meeting. I think maybe we will just wrap up so that people have a chance to see each other as well. I want to thank LMC Media for co-hosting this and enabling all of us to get together. I want to thank the panelists for an outstanding presentation of a very complicated, multifaceted program, from both sides, from the tenant, the landlord, the lawyers, the courts, the county agencies, the state agencies, the federal agencies. It's clearly a very complicated project, program, and situation. I think that we've illustrated the kinds of help that's available to work our way through this for those in need. And I want to thank everybody for that presentation that helped us understand it. So with that, I want to close and tell everybody to hang around, because our technician is going to make everybody available to each other to chat one at a time. Unmute yourselves so you can chat and say hello to everybody. And thank you all for coming. Our next program will be the second Tuesday of December, which is December 8th. See you again then. Thank you all for coming, and thank everybody for your presentation. And thank you, Helen, too, for